Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. We're here today with our special guest on this Conversations with Cabral, and we have Clint Ober with us today. Clint, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you today. You are our first guest on Earthing, and luckily we got the expert in the space to be able to talk about this topic. This is something that I've mentioned on the podcast, I would say just here and there, not giving it's really the due that it deserves. And that's why today it'll be great to have a full hour-long conversation really about earthing and all the different benefits. I've received these benefits in my life. Certainly, I feel a whole lot better when I'm earthing, and that's why I want to pass this down to other people. So let's go over right from the beginning. Well, first, I would love to hear what earthing is in your words, but also how did you get into this very niche-based topic?
Okay, well, I think I'll reverse those a little bit.
All right, that works.
It'll make a little more sense. Basically, I spent 30 years in the communications industry, and I retired when I was about 50. I'm now 70. I'll be 77 in a few weeks. But I spent 30 years in the communications industry. And in that industry, you have to ground everything to the earth in order to prevent electromagnetic interference, to get rid of static charges, and so you have internal electrical stability in your electronic components, your transmitters, receivers, and then going into the home, you have to ground the wires before you go into a home, like with cable television or any other kind of cable situation. And in order, if there's lightning in the area, so it's automatically grounded to the earth rather than allowed to travel into the home and blow up a TV set or start a fire or things like that. But it's really about signal quality. In the old days, you used to have 4 TV signals and static and all those kind of, so we'd have to ground them out and shield everything, and in order so that you have perfect pictures and perfect sound and data transmission and so on. So anyhow, with that background, I retired when I was about 50, and I spent about 4 years doing nothing. And then one day I accidentally asked a question. I figured it'd take a few months or days or weeks to answer it, and I'm still doing it 23 years later. But the question I asked was, I wonder if there's a consequence to humans no longer being naturally grounded, because I recognized that everybody started wearing the rubber-soled shoes, the rubber-soled tennis shoes. Back when I was a kid, we were always barefoot, or we wore a leather-soled shoe, which is semi-conductive. And in about 1960, we invented the polymers, and then first thing we did was put them on the shoes. And then we started carpeting our homes with polymer fibers and various other polymers. And today, it's really a challenge to go touch the earth. And actually, but anyhow, so that's kind of how I got here. I asked a question, but to what grounding is, first of all, you have to know the earth has a slight negative electrical charge. And what that means is it has an abundance of free electrons. They're free. They're just sitting there, and the only thing they do is move and reduce charge. The greatest example of it is lightning. If there's an electrical imbalance in the atmosphere, then there'll be a welling up of enough free electrons on the earth and a crack in the fissure, and then you see this light. Most of the time, it's underneath the cloud. It's going from the earth up. If it's lightning coming from the side of a cloud, it's from electrons are going down. But anyhow, so it's a natural phenomena, but it's widely used in everything electrical, everything electronics, and that. But what happens is when you connect something to the earth, or as a person, if you stand barefoot on the earth, your body is electrically conductive, then your body will become negatively charged. It will equalize with the earth, maintain the same amount of electrons per rata as the earth itself. And so you're one and the same electrically with the earth. There is no charge. So everything is electrically stable. The internal melee of the body, all of the electrical functioning of the body is electrically stable. So as soon as you disconnect from the earth, then you become positive. You start losing electrons because you're breathing oxygen, and then you have all the metabolic processes, and it's a long story. But so anyhow, what we learned about grounding over the years was very simple, and the thing that kept me in it for all these years. And we've since produced like 25 peer-reviewed published studies. They're all listed on the earthinginstitute.net, and we have, books, movies, everything, all this stuff has come out of this. But basically, the reason somebody would ground is because you can't have inflammation in a grounded object. You can't have common inflammation in a grounded body. And, the word inflammation is, body inflamed, body on fire. And it's primarily the fire is produced by reactive oxygen species during an immune cascade, where if there's not enough redox potential or enough free electrons to reduce those remaining reactive oxygen species. I mean, they call them reactive because they're short of an electron. So that means they're electrical in nature. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to steal an electron, and normally the immune system releases like a neutrophil. It'll release a neutrophil to knock out a pathogen or a damaged cell. So it'll swim over and it'll encapsulate the damaged cell, and then it releases the reactive oxygens, and that steals the electrons from the pathogen or the damaged cell. And that's how the immune system works. That's how it neutralizes.
Which causes more inflammation in the body, and then I think that's a really good point. And that's something, so this is not taught in even a lot of naturopathic schools for natural health. I learned about this only because I studied a German form of naturopathy called bioregulatory medicine, where they talk about zeta potential, they talk about specific hertz within the body. And then I was trained in microscopy, where I actually looked at live blood, and you could show someone by drinking a specific solution. I mean, anything like some lemon water, believe it or not, which will have more negative ions, or earthing, or just going outside, getting out there, or just we'll go through it today, what it specifically it is. But then you could run that blood under the microscope, and you could see the red blood cells are no longer stuck together. And if the cells are not stuck together, well, now you can oxygenate, you can bring more nutrition, and you can remove more waste from those cells themselves. So, I mean, this is, you have 25 clinical studies on your website, which I'm going to link up today in the show notes, but I can tell you as a clinician that you can see this right inside of a lab or inside of a clinic as well, for sure. So that's really great that it's basically, as we age, we have more oxidation in the body, we have more inflammation in the body, and if we have more positive ions, which sounds like a good thing, but it's always the reverse. If we don't have enough negative ions, then there's more free radicals within the body. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Yes. Now, basically, in nature, when we lived on the earth, before modern times, or before we started sleeping in beds and wearing shoes all the time, wearing leather is kind of a semiconductor because it absorbs the perspiration of the feet and the salts, in the perspiration, and they become very conductive. So throughout time, whether we were wearing a leather type shoe or going barefoot, we were always naturally grounded. So you couldn't have chronic inflammation in the body because it's not possible. And to paint a better picture of that, if you take a look at the animals who live in the wild, cancer, cardiovascular disease, all of these modern health disorders that humans experience, these animals do not manifest that. On the other hand, and I can qualify that a little bit, unless humans have contaminated their environment, then cancer starts showing up. But generally in the wild, animals don't manifest inflammation-related health disorders, in which that's everything from autism to lupus, and all the way across the spectrum. But on the other hand, the animals who live indoors with their owners, generally all in their lifetime, experience the same health disorders as their owners, including cancer. They have a 50% death rate of cancer, where in the wild, cancer doesn't exist as we know it. So So it's an environmental thing. I mean, in the environment, meaning living in a grounded environment versus today we live in an ungrounded environment. So our bodies are short free electrons. Our bodies no longer maintain this negative charge. And in nature, throughout evolution, whatever, the body didn't have to take it into account because it was always grounded. It was a resource that was just naturally there, like oxygen and sunlight and so on. But it was only when we put shoes on that we started to see the rise in autoimmune diseases like diabetes and all of them. And now we're still growing exponentially, and we have the best medicine, the best everything, and people are getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So anyhow, it's very simple. It's just we accidentally invented shoes and creature comforts. And man, they were great because before then, people were poor, couldn't afford shoes. If you had leather, it rained, you had to take them off, and you couldn't wear shoes and get them wet because that would ruin them. But now with rubber sole shoes and leather and synthetic shoes, everybody can afford shoes, and everybody got sick. So, but anyhow, just keep it in perspective again. I use these little metaphors. Back in 1960, about 90% of the visits to a practitioner were for infectious disease, acute injury, childbirth, and those kind of health disorders. Today, 99% of visits to a practitioner are for an inflammation-related health disorder.
Yeah,
so we've changed our environment.
We changed our environment in so many different ways with the food, the way that we live. And I'm in agreement with you. And what I would say is, besides shoes, we invented high-rise buildings. So for example, in Boston, I lived on the 16th floor of a glass, essentially, high-rise building. And yes, beautiful views and right living downtown, all those great things. But it was remarkable that on the weekend when I would go up to Maine, where it's older, like timber style house, wood floors, all those different types of things. The first thing I would do is I would kick off my shoes, of course, because I'm going from the city where you don't want to walk around barefoot to out essentially in the country. And I would walk around all the time barefoot, dirty feet, all of that. And yes, it was a change from the city, noises, all that, but I felt remarkably better every time, like rejuvenated, recharged. And when people go camping, they say the same thing. And you're getting the auditory noises from the animals, but you're also getting these negative ions back into your body. So can you elaborate on that, but also let us know, how do we actually absorb those negative ions, those electrons?
Well, the body is conductive because it has fluids and salts. But what we've learned is the bottom of the hands and the bottom of the feet are the most conductive parts of the body. And so you think in nature, in nature we were always touching live green things and food and whatever, and we were walking barefoot. And so it makes sense that over the years, and there's more nerve endings there and all of those things. But you mentioned blood earlier, about the blood separating. So what happens, and we did a study on this called a blood viscosity study, because we couldn't figure out, we understood that earthing would reduce pain, and we know that pain is a result of inflammation. You can't have pain if you don't have inflammation, because inflammation is the pain signal. So anyhow, we knew all of that, but we didn't understand how this was all occurring. What's the mechanism of action? How does ground circulate through the body? How does the body become grounded? And, what is, just what's going on? So anyhow, Stephen Sinatra is a cardiologist in upstate Maine or Connecticut. And he called me up one day when he was working on some of the stuff we were working on. He says, well, you need to come back here and I'm going to get a group of about a dozen docs together, and we're going to try to figure this out. So what we did is we drew blood from everybody, white field, dark field, on every single person before we grounded them. And you could see that a lot of them were really, and these were really healthy people in the health business, some of them, but their blood was very thick and sticky. And but then we grounded everybody for 30 to 45 minutes, and every single person, their blood even, I mean, their blood before all looked a little different, but it was all kind of a lot of rouleau formation and a lot of clumping and so on. But afterwards, every red blood cell in all subjects was beautifully separated. And they were, after being grounded for 30, 45 minutes. And so then what we did is we measured, then we did a second study very quickly, and we actually measured the zeta potential, or the electrical surface charge of the red blood cells before and after grounding. And what we found was that we increased the negative electrical surface charge by almost 300%, meaning they would have been like minus -5 by themselves. And that's dissolving calcium, doing various things to keep your whatever. But on the average, when we got done, they were 15 to 20 millivolts negative. So that means there was an abundance of free electrons on the blood. Now the blood, because they're more negative, they repel each other. And so the blood's automatically separated. So in nature, in the wild animals, and anybody who is grounded, their blood is naturally, the blood viscosity is naturally restored to normal. So anyhow, then we did that's when we did the second study, and all of those are published. And we thought that was really the big deal. But the problem is how do you explain blood viscosity to anyone? But anyhow, then we realized that the blood can get into the capillary because the blood is thin now. Like Dr. Sinatra calls it, like red wine rather than ketchup. Mm-hmm. And he says now it gets into the capillaries and it can oxygenate the tissue and clean out, the debris and sometimes the spirochetes or whatever's in the, in the capillaries where you weren't getting good circulation. And the first thing we see when that occurs, especially with women, their skin, their facial skin gets pink, their demeanor changes, their smile changes and everything, and they feel better. And so that's what we called it, a beauty product in the early days, because all the gals looked 10 years younger after they were grounded for 30 minutes. But it was normalizing blood viscosity so the blood could flow. And then all the people who had cold fingers and cold toes, they would actually, sometimes in the little seminars, we'd ask, try to find people with cold fingers, cold toes. That's almost all women. Mm-hmm. And so we'd put an electrode patch in the palm of their hand with a ground cord and grounded, of course, through the system that we had there. And then we'd ask them to let us know when their toes are warmed up. And, it takes about 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden, because now the body can regulate its body temperature better because the blood is thin and it can move and not only oxygenate the tissue, but regulate the body's temperature. And then you don't need socks and you don't have cold fingers and cold toes. So the mechanism of action, I believe, is to a large degree when you stand barefoot on the earth or when you get grounded, the first thing that happens is the red blood cells you increase the negative surface charge with free electrons. So now they have 3 times as many electrons as they had before on the surface. So now if they go somewhere and reduce inflammation, they can give up some of those electrons, and a minute later they can pick them back up. Yes. And so it's just an automatic system. So I believe the blood is the primary rapid carrier or diffusion of the ground throughout the body. But we know that every cell in the body becomes more negative when you are grounded. And then that creates an electro repulsion also, because like pushing 2 little negative magnets together, they repel each other. There's a force. Mm-hmm. So if all your cells are more negative, then it's easier to get up. It's easier to move. Everything is easier. Everything is lighter. My own target. So
yeah, without a doubt. No, it's just I wanted you to finish that for sure because I agree with you. So I believe that the way that grounding works as well is through frequency and through the negative ions. Yes. So because of studying PEMF and looking at the hertz of the earth, somewhere around 7.8 or so, we can kind of differ here and there. I believe that since we are electrically charged beings. I mean, we literally have a nervous system that's built on electricity. And I would never have believed this until I did microscopy work. So it's hard for people to really imagine it unless they've seen their blood under a microscope. But I can tell people that when you have those all white, fingernails where you don't have any of those half moons and the actual good blood flow, and you have those cold hands, cold tip of the nose, and cold feet, a lot of people blame it on, low thyroid, low whatever. All of that's, you can say, yes, that's part of it. However, it's because the blood is not flowing to those capillaries because of some type of restriction, capillary restriction that very well may be, and I've seen actually be caused by what you say is called red blood cell rouleau. It's just, for those people that don't speak that language, it's coagulation. The red blood cells get stuck together and it looks like a bottleneck right around the wrist-based area. And so think about a bunch of rafts going down a big river and all of a sudden the river gets smaller and smaller and smaller. All those rafts get stuck. That's your red blood cells, those little tubes. And so by increasing the negative charge, it's now like bumper cars and they all get moved away from each other. So now they go single file. Again, I'm being really rudimentary here. Then they can flow into the rest of the body. And for people, it was almost a given that when I looked at someone's blood that had any type of pain or autoimmune issues or a lot of brain fog, high blood pressure, that there was always going to be a lot of red blood cell rouleau. And I said, because I would show them the chart, I said, listen, I don't know what your blood's going to look like. I'm not a magician. I believe it's going to look like this. Let's see. And here's why. And that was a game changer for many people because we could look at their blood the next time they come back in. And I'll tell you one other thing, because a lot of people say, well, it's just hydration. You have to understand that your blood is about 90% water, the plasma. And water carries a charge. So it's, yes, you should be hydrated. And that's going to allow greater than working with the earth, with grounding, with the negative hertz. You actually need to be hydrated because water carries electricity.
Yep. The reason blood cells stick together and stack up in like a rouleau formation is because they're short electrons. One of them doesn't have enough electrons, so it's more positive than the one that has a few more. So they stick together and share an electron. It's kind of like electroplating chrome on a bumper. You put a negative charge on the bumper and a positive charge on the chrome, put them together, and it's called electroplation. And that's kind of like plaquing in the body. That's an electrical term. Plaque is an electrical term. Plating. So the blood cells are sticking together because there's not enough electrons. So yeah, it's all interesting. It's all fun.
What have you seen? Because you now have 25 clinical studies on this. I mean, I can always give my take on it. We can essentially say it can be used for any dis-ease of the body. And again, we're not giving medical advice based here. We're not giving treatment protocols for disease. But if there's an imbalance in the body, you're going to benefit from this. However, in your experience, what have you seen in your clinical studies that have really gotten the most benefit?
Well, I think, one of the groups that I worked with a lot is lupus and MS and severe arthritis and everything else along the way, but more of a focus on like MS. They just seem to show up. I guess it was the rheumatologist. They said, here, you can have them. I can't help them. And that's still how they are today with them. It's crazy because there's not much they can do, But anyhow, MS is neutrophils oxidizing and destroying the myelin sheath around the nerves. And so that's an inflammatory process. One neutrophil is trying to fix something, clean it up, collateral damage creates more damage, and it's just a chain reaction, and it's a slow burning fire. So anyhow, I started grounding people with MS, and whether it's fibromyalgia or any kind of a chronic inflammatory condition, there's really only one. It's inflammation.
I was going to name fibromyalgia. I've seen a lot of great work with this in fibromyalgia, so that's good that you named that. Yeah. And
so it's all kind of related, but there's another component to all of it, and we can talk about it later if you want, but it's the emotional, that creates, what's feeding the fire, what's feeding the stress, what's elevating, what's, causing the chronic chronically elevated sympathetic state, the cortisol, and so on. And that's usually emotionally driven, or there's been great losses or things like that. But anyhow, the thing that I learned early on is I could put a patch on a lady's arm who has MS. And you know how they are. I mean, they don't have control a lot of times. They have to keep control, and they're just in pain. Mm-hmm. And so I started grounding them, and then within minutes, the pain subsides. This is just putting a patch, electrode patch, on the palm of the hand. They could go outdoors and put their hand on the grass and sit there for an hour, and the same thing would happen. So anyhow, it would. So what happened was, the oxidative radicals are destroying the myelin sheath and creating pain, heat. So as soon as you patch the body and with ground, then because of those positive charges, they're going to be pulling all of the electrons into the body. However you want to say it, could be, but it's equalization. And if there's charge, there's going to be a pull. So anyhow, as the electrons come through up the wire from the earth into the body and then down the arm, then they go in and put the fire out. They reduce the remaining reactive oxygens that are feeding the fire, and then the fire stops. And after a few years of doing that, I've been doing this for over 20 years now. After a few years, I actually got to the point where I said I could tell women with MS, I could say, you know, as soon as I ground them in about 5 minutes, I say, okay, you no longer have MS. What you have is damage from MS. Mm-hmm. You may recover, you may not, but the body is a self-healing mechanism. So the body can recover a lot. But but the point I was trying to make was, as long as your body is grounded and flooded with free electrons, you have a lot of redox potential, a lot of negative charge, you can't have inflammation, and this won't come back. But as soon as you come back, and then what I found is people who had MS, for instance, if I grounded them for 8 hours, they would sleep well. But by 10 in the morning, 11 in the morning, then they would start going downhill. So then finally we got them so we could ground up for 12 hours a day to noon or whatever. And then we saw really good benefits. But then all of a sudden we recognized that you need to be grounded 16 hours a day. You need to be grounded more than not grounded. If you have a significant...
Yes, for people that are sick.
Yes, significantly compromised. So, but anyhow, it's anything that is inflammatory, flares, flares like cytokine storms and so on, all of that, you can take a cytokine storm in the lungs and put an electrode patch on each lung, and within minutes, it shuts it down, because again, you're flooding the body with free electron. And yes, the cytokine storm is storming because there's not enough reboot. It's creating its own fire, feeding its own fire.
Yeah. And go ahead. You finish your thought.
But anyhow, so I finally got down to the point where it's really all one thing. It's really inflammation. And what that means to me is inflammation is kind of a misnomer. What it is the immune system is dysfunctioning. The immune system is in an automatic loop, mm-hmm, and it's creating the fire that it's feeding, and at the same time it's trying to put out the fire that it's feeding, and it's using up all of the resources of the immune system, and then the body gets compromised on all levels, and so on. So it's I've learned that I can honestly, in my own mind, from my own experience and observations, that I can tell anybody that if you have health disorder, then something you're doing is interfering with your immune system's ability to maintain and restore health, because it only knows to do one thing: to restore and maintain health. And health is the body's most natural state. I have learned that. So we have to go hurt ourselves. We have to do something, or we have to bring something into our environment, and mental is a big part of it. Mental stress is a huge component of it. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. And that's, so listeners of this show will know that I have a book called The Rain Barrel Effect. And in that I detail how we help people get well. And that's diet, exercise, stress reduction, toxin removal, rest, emotional balance, scientifically backed supplements. And this would actually be considered a supplement, this grounding that we'll be talking about. It's a supplement to the body, to a healthy lifestyle, and then a success mindset. So 3 out of those 8 parts are all based on the mind. And that's because there's a really nice philosophy. Again, this is going back to traditional naturopathy and bioregulatory medicine, called neuroendoimmunology. It's the nervous system is triggered by something, and it could be mentally or physically, emotionally, that then sets off the hormones in the body, which is that sympathetic nervous system through cortisol, norepinephrine, neurotransmitters, et cetera, that are going to increase or decrease inflammation as well. And then we have the immune system that, we like to say is malfunctioning sometimes, but what I've realized in my practice is typically we give it a reason to malfunction. It knows to do its job pretty well, but when you have, food sensitivities, or you're eating the wrong foods or inflammatory foods, or you have gut permeability, parasites, SIBO, whatever it might be, you're creating an inflammation and autoimmune, the ability to cause an autoimmune issue. And what I've seen grounding to be great for is grounding is going to help for that inflammation, while at the same time, you're also looking for what is the root cause of your inflammation. And that's going to be that's the game changer, because grounding and the alike will help with the inflammation. But at the same time, you need to patch up the holes in that rowboat, because you can keep bailing, but at some point, hey, let's find that root cause. And that's like MS, fibromyalgia, lupus. They all have a root cause, any autoimmune based issue. And grounding is a great way of working and squelching inflammation, and then working with that root cause based level as well.
Yeah. And one thing I'll share with you too is I had a lady one time, when we would ground her pH would normalize.
How did you measure pH for her?
I'm sorry?
How did you measure pH for her? Was this blood-based, or was it saliva, urine strips?
It was saliva and I think it was saliva and urine strips.
Got it. Okay.
But anyhow, she was going along fine. And then all of a sudden, her pH went way off. And no matter what we did, and we'd known this person for 6 months, no matter what we did, there's no way that pH would come back into line. And so I thought, well, there's something there that we don't know, because a lot of people do. It helps normalize pH in the body, because again, that's an electrical phenomena also. And pH and it's all the same thing. But anyhow, a few months after, we were sitting down one evening, we had a group of us for dinner, and she told one of the girls that she was getting a divorce. And a year later, after that was all done, her pH went back to normal. But what we learned, or what I learned there, is mental thoughts can trigger and shift the pH in just moments. And that sets off all the cascades, all the hormones, and the cortisol, everything else. And so the mental, emotional, that's a huge, huge piece of it, because that's what's feeding the fire, feeding the inflammation, feeding, setting the pH, and so on. That's more your specialty, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
No, that's what I've realized as well, without a doubt, that you can have underlying physical health issues, but the trigger is almost always the loss of a loved one, a breakup, anything that had deep meaning to you, the loss of self, is what I've seen then trigger the autoimmune based issues. So I mean, that's 9 out of 10 cases. There'll always be one that isn't. But for sure, I agree with that with 100%. And what you're talking about in terms of acids is true, not at a blood pH level that, people like to talk about, but at a tissue level. And so you'll see what the body actually starts to be, they say, become more acid when you're angry, when you're upset. And it's true. Your body actually produces more acids. And then we know that from exercise alone. Exercise alone produces more acid in the body. So that's really great that you've seen that, you've looked at that, and that's why the mental emotional part of it. If you've been trying to get well for a long time and you've seen a lot of practitioners, done a lot of work, and you're still not well, then I really implore you to look at the mental emotional part of it, even if you don't believe it's there.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, or find a new environment where you don't have that kind of stress.
Yes. That's one of the best natural cancer-based part of the protocols that people go through is they get out of the city, they get into the country. Part of that is grounding. They don't even know it. And they're drinking fresh spring water. They're hearing the birds chirping. They don't have all these, web-based devices and social media, because stress can lead to cancer. And
yeah, well, that's a big one. Yeah, I mean, cancer is an inflammation-related health disorder. You can't have cancer unless you have inflammation for an extended period. And so what's creating inflammation? The inflammation is, it's stress. It's, it's environmental stress, psychological stress, mental stress, whatever. We need to think about things differently.
I agree. We need to get a little bit more simpler and move back to a lot of things that I think build us up. And it's funny, that's why you mentioned that. You said you need 16 hours or more of the grounding when you're really not doing well. And I agree with that. I actually liken it for people trying to heal that you need to take in more energy than you give out. And then they say, okay, I can kind of understand that. So I said, think about every activity that you go through during the day. Are you taking energy in? Or are you giving it out? After you do it, you feel a little weaker, or you brought in more energy, and not from an anxious-based energy, but actual energy. And so, like, I had Addisons disease, I had rheumatoid arthritis, I had POTS syndrome, I had a lot of issues. So, that's what got me into all of this. And I realized that, hey, I got worse when I stayed up late with my friends, and I got better by Friday when I was giving my body more rest, all of that. Then I get worse just in a week, one night out. And so I realized, like, listen, you're not doing yourself any favors, even though you're enjoying yourself for, 6 hours or so. So, but over time, now I could, if I needed to, I don't plan to, but if I stayed out till 2 a.m, I'd be totally fine. I've done overnight flights and I'm fine. But it's because I gave myself a period of time of rejuvenating and rebuilding. So how can people, we're going to talk about the earthing mats, which I personally use. And we talked about grass. I believe that the best way to get negative ions into the body is walking on damp grass first thing in the morning. So that morning dew, which contains then the current, which is the water, the natural dampness there. And then walking close to the ocean, right near where basically the waves are breaking on the sand. That's what I know about. What other places, or maybe you expand upon those, can people get the greatest amount of negative ions?
Well, the greatest amount, first of all, time of day has something to do with it. There's other things that have things to do with it, but the wind, east winds, west winds, a lot of things can impact the air ions and so on. But the electrical surface charge of the Earth is somewhat universal. Covers the whole entire Earth. The oceans are salt water. And they're very good conductors. So anytime you're in salt water or on the beach, like you say, that's probably one of the more grounding times. Or if you were to bury yourself in the sand, you're about as grounded as you're ever going to get. Or if you go into a cave that has a damp floor, take your shoes off. Especially if you have knee, hip, ankle, all those kind of issues. But anyhow, second best would be, like you say, the grass and any kind of soil that contains enough moisture sufficient for plants to grow, for healthy plants to grow. I have gone out into the deserts where, where it's 100 degrees and 110 sometimes, and because I wanted to test things, and I would put a ground rod in the earth or in the sand down a couple of feet, and then test with spectrum analyzers and voltmeters and everything else, and measure what happens to the body versus no grounding and grounding. And so there's always an effect. There's an electric. The earth has an electric field, an energy field, and a resonant energy. That's going like this. And so whenever we're close to the earth or touch the earth, then we close couple with it, and then it helps calm our nervous system down, rather than being at home or in a home where there's a lot of electrical noise and everything, our body's vibrating at 60 hertz or whatever. So, but there is a secondary effect, and it's probably as important as the electrons themselves. It's this resonating electric field. But anyhow, if you kick the sand back a little bit, and even in the desert, there's moist sand underneath of it, an inch or so down. So anyhow, there is ground everywhere. But the other component that is really, really important that I found in outdoors grounding, which really makes it the ultimate, is that if there's sunshine, Now your body's like a fuel cell. You're getting negative charge from the earth and photons. It's very important because we used to live in the sun. I mean, now today we have roofs over our head. Our vitamin D is, 20 or 25 or 30. I try to maintain mine as close to 100 as possible. But I do a lot of outdoor, but primarily I'm still doing supplements. But anyhow, it's so the thing I try to tell everybody is any ground is better than no ground. But the better, if you can go outdoors, put your bare feet on the grass or on the dirt if there's damp or it's nice, which is where most people can do. They can't go to the beach. And then sit in the sunshine or in shade where there's a lot of sunshine bouncing around. Then you're going to feel in 30 minutes, it's going to change your life. If you have pain in your body, you're going to feel it, subside. And you may not cure. I mean, it's like when you are grounded, let me throw this out. If you went and had surgery, you would have a hot burning pain on the skin. That's what they call oxidative pain, where the neutrophils are oxidizing all the damaged cells and everything. But it's creating more damage with the oxidation than it's trying to solve. So as soon as you ground the body, that stops. You can't have this hot burning pain in the body when you are grounded because you reduce the oxidation. You will still have that subtle healing pain that says, leave me alone, let me recover. But you won't have that, what I call the Vicodin pain. So the point is, when you get grounded, then things are going to change in your body. Your body's going to go negative. Your blood is going to change. Your demeanor is going to change. Your emotions are going to play. It's hard to be unhappy, and upset and mad at the world when you're sitting outdoors on a chair or on the earth with your bare feet on the earth and sunshine raining down on you. It's just hard to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yes.
Yeah. So anyhow, it's so outdoor grounding anytime you can. If you can't do anything else in the world, a half hour in the morning and a half hour at night is going to change your life. It's going to drain. It's going to ground out the inflammation from sleeping ungrounded, or all the metabolic and healing processes that took place overnight. And then at the end of the day, you've got all the battle from doing whatever you do throughout the day. So you want to ground it out before you go to sleep so you can sleep better. So, but those two things. And then if your health is more compromised, the only people who really get into the grounding products are people who have their health is compromised and they need more grounding. Grounding makes them feel better. Grounding puts out the fire. Their energy comes back. They can get out of bed in the morning. But anybody, you don't have, if you're healthy and young, an hour a day, half hour in the morning, half hour at night is really going to be beneficial. That's for the guys. The women, they're a little bit more sensitive, and they need more grounding because they don't get as much. They don't play golf like men do. They don't get outdoors and play and touch grounded things and get accidentally or incidentally grounded. Women are in shoes on carpets and cars and offices, and they just don't get out like now I'm talking about a generation here, younger generation, a little different.
So if women, but they don't, you haven't found that women need more grounding. They just need that 1 hour a day, but they have to make sure more that they're outside and getting that.
Women are more sensitive. Their sympathetic nervous system responds more so than men to almost anything and everything. And every time the sympathetic response, you get a sympathetic response, you get a cortisol spike. And as that cortisol builds up in the body, and if you stay in those states or chronically, manifesting this, then what happens is you get enough inflammation, which leads to anxiety and irritability and so on. And so that doesn't happen in men so much. I've seen it universally in women, but it's because it's the mother thing. I think they can sense things more so than men do. They're just more sensitive. And so they need to be more grounded. They need to ground out the spark of that sensitivity. I usually tell this story about when I was a kid. We had a ranch in Montana, and some summers we would have just an infestation of jackrabbits. And then there were always these coyotes that were, the coyotes ate, or the rabbits ate the grass, the coyotes ate the rabbits. And every once in a while you'd see a coyote sneaking up on a rabbit, and his ears would perk up, and the coyote would lunge. The rabbit would spring into the air, and he'd zigzag back and forth across the pasture. And 99% of the time, the coyote ran out of energy, and the rabbit would go just a little bit further so you keep an eye on him, but he'd just sit there and pant, and then eventually get up and wander away. Then the rabbit would sit there, you could see that he was stressed, and then all of a sudden he'd have this visceral shake, and then he'd go back to eating grass like nothing ever happened. Well, in our society, we're filled with coyotes. Every time you get up in the morning, phone rings, the kids, everything that goes on in our life is a coyote, and it causes cortisol to spike. And we're trying to respond to our children, our husbands, families, whatever, work, everything. And all of this causes, chronically elevated sympathetic state, chronically elevated cortisol. And that eats away on women more so than men. So anyhow, you have to ground out the coyotes. Yes. That's what this half hour in the morning and half hour at night.
That's
ground out the stress from the chase, and it's going to change your life.
And they have a book on that I'm sure you've read called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers.
Yeah, Packer. Yeah,
yes. And it's a great analogy. We don't shake it off. And I think another benefit, if people can get out there 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night, is they're being exposed to that sunshine, just like you said. So you get the blue light, and then you get the fading sun at night, which is going to help with your sleep. And if you can improve your sleep and you can decrease inflammation, well, now you're going to really start the healing process.
Yeah, this is nature. This is
right. We forgot about that. Yeah, we're part of nature, which is it's an interesting thing. We humans, we keep trying to move away from nature, but the further we move away, the unhealthier we get. Because we need nature as humans. We're one with the earth. So we talked about those things. I just want to reiterate that you can't be outside with your rubber sandals on, that you do need to walk barefoot on the grass. And if you live I wouldn't say that I'm in the country right now, I'm not in the city right now, there's a little bit of grass. So if you can find a little bit of grass, get on that grass wherever it is, barefoot, and soak in a little bit of that morning sun. Luckily, I have a dog.
Water it down.
Yeah, water it down. Okay, and so watering it down would work, right? Because you just
that's even more powerful. Yeah.
What about sitting, lying on the ground versus just standing? Is there a greater effect in your research, or it's fine?
No, it's all the same, because you when you're close coupled with the earth and you're resonating with the earth, your organs and everything in your body, it's like. We learned when we did our cortisol study, the gals who are from the East Coast, the airline stewards that were in our study, their cortisol was 3 hours off. But as soon as we grounded them, then they synchronized with the earth in San Diego, and that changed their cortisol profile. So there's rhythms in the earth that are a metronome for the circadian rhythms of the body, and this hormone secretion profiles and so on. And so that's part of this. But the other part of it is you just take a blanket and lay it on the ground, because the moisture will hydrate the blanket in the earth. I mean, take a sheet, do whatever. Just go lay on the grass. But if you don't like the bugs, just take a thin cotton sheet and put it down. It's the same.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. And they make great little Turkish towels or Turkish blankets that are very, very thin, and you could just lay that down right there. So let's talk about, though, grounding-based technology. So people that don't have access to it, or, not everybody has a half hour in the morning, half hour at night, and they want to be able to get these benefits. So just so people can get a little bit of a thought process here. I've been going all in on grounding over the past 3 or 4 weeks. I'm using this underneath my desk right now. This is a very small mat. You can see that it's grounded just to this one peg right here and plugged into the wall. Of course, this is using grounding technology, which I'm going to allow you to explain. You should not use ungrounded, outlets or anything like that. Obviously, there's a potential danger to that, but not when you're using the right technology. And what I do is I just place my feet on this barefoot while I'm working during the day. And then at night, you can do it just for yourself, or you can do it for, a full bed if you're sleeping with your spouse or partner on both sides. And really, it's a rubber-based mat, so you're not going to feel too much. But correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a way to simulate the natural negative ions from the earth, especially if you're not sleeping on the earth at night. Could you elaborate on this technology?
Yeah. First of all, I have to tell you that I never in my life ever thought I would ever be in the product business, because I've always been in soft communications, all of that, television and so on. But anyhow, when we were doing the studies, trying to validate, does loss of ground affect our physiology or our bodies, we had to create ways to ground people. And everybody's wearing shoes and walking around, so it's not easy to ground people. So anyhow, what we ended up doing is we would use electrode patches like EKG patches, put them in the palms of the hand, bottom of the feet, connect them to a cord via a ground or a ground rod outdoors. And then we had them connected with fiber optic cable, so there's no possibility of contamination. And then we would do biofeedback studies. We would do blood viscosity. We do all these studies. And then we would use the mats, kind of like we used in the communications industry. They were anti-static, but we made them conductive, so they would simulate the earth. So all of these products I'm going to tell you about, they were all byproducts of doing our studies. The researchers and the subjects and the relatives of the subjects all wanted the products after we did studies, and that created a demand. Then all of a sudden there was a business. And it took years for all that to evolve. But anyhow, the products that we created most of all was the simple electrode patch. That's the most profound. If you have MS, put a patch on and keep it on until you recover. You can't be grounded 24/7 maybe, but sleep with it, do whatever you can, stay grounded as much as possible. And that's a flare. Arthritic flares, any kind of a flare, patches or acute, sprained ankle, acute, anything's acute. The patches seem to be the best. But the thing that we wanted to do once we got further down the road was we asked ourselves, well, what's the one thing we can do for people that they can incorporate this into their life, so there's not a lot of compliance and there's not a lot of all these problems that go with health products. And so we said, well, the best thing to do is give them something to sleep on, because you can ground it, and then all they have to do when they come home at night, just go to bed and go to sleep like they do every night. They don't have to do anything different, and they're grounded for the rest of their life, whatever. So anyhow, we focused on the bed pad, and it took us 15 years to get a good product that worked. We started out with silver and cotton. The silver kept oxidizing because when you touch it, it leaves fingerprints, and that oxidizes the silver, and it would eventually lose its conductivity, and it was expensive. So we had to abandon that. A few years back, we started developing the carbon mats, which is what you have there. And that took us, about 5 years, and probably $1 million worth of research and R&D, because it can't be toxic. It's got to be it's got to be conductive, and people got to sleep on it. This is and it's electrical. So this has been a real challenge all the way. But anyhow, so all of the products are very simple. They are connected with a ground cord, and in the ground cord there's what they call a 100K resistor. So it's what they call a soft ground. So electrical charge can't move fast. It's a few nanoseconds slower than conventional charge. So there's no you eliminate the possibility of an electrical event. So it goes to the ground rod and ground wire, ground port in your electrical outlet. There's a tester to check it and make sure it's working, and it is in most all homes today. And if you don't have a really older home, they don't have ground, then you have to have an electrician come put in a ground rod, or you get one of these simple ground rods that they have. They're $10, $20, whatever they are. And so anyhow, the grounding a half hour at a time is really good, and you're going to get improvements. And that's a good way for you to find out if you want a mat or need a mat. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, the second thing we took into consideration, when does, the body, 90% of the healing and recovery, the restorative actions occur during sleep. So the best thing to do is to ground people during sleep. Because again, they don't have time to go outdoors and put their feet on the earth. There's too much life going on around that inhibits that. And some people can, and that's great. But grounding people during sleep is the number one thing. It's the number one benefit that we felt that we could do, and that's where we have focused our efforts. The universal mat, like you have there, you can put it on the floor, put your feet on it, put it on your desk, put your computer on it. You can put it in a chair, sit on it. You can sleep on it. You can roll it up and travel with it. You can so that's probably the most convenient product.
Yes, for sure.
And there's millions and millions of those out there. But anyhow, so that's and then the patch kit. That's really all we have. They have a pillowcase now too. Grounded pillowcase that covers your existing pillow. Yes. Put your pillow in it, zip it up, and then it's grounded, and then you put your normal pillowcase over the top of it. So, and again, the mat, you can put your sheet over the top of it, but if you have flares or significant health challenges, sleep directly on it. A lot of skin contact. But anyhow, so those three products are the real, it's a mattress cover. It's a single mat that you can just put anywhere and lay on it, or the universal mat, or the patches. Those are the products that are 90% of the business. We do have other things. But again, those products were created by consumer demand. They were byproducts of conventional ESD industry or communications industry grounding. And all we did was make them more conductive rather than dissipate static electricity. We're trying to conduct ground. So what happens is you put them in the bed and they're identical, electrically identical to laying on the earth.
So one thing I would say is I've actually been familiar with earthing, so I just want to mention this too, because you wrote a book called Earthing, the most important health discovery yet. I'll just hold that up. I'll link up to all this in the show notes here today. So I'm very familiar. I mean, again, I started reading about this, let's say 12, 13 years ago when I was really getting into naturopathy. And one of the big things that I've seen is this is actually reproducible. So real science is reproducible. So you can reproduce these results every single time. And not everybody will be watching this on video, but if they are, they can actually see the thermal imaging. So thermal imaging is a great way to look for inflammation and poor blood flow. A great way. Again, I'm not saying it's a medical diagnostic tool. However, I've always recommended it to look for precancerous based issues or stagnations in the body. And you can do reproducible before and afters with grounding and thermal imagery. But the other thing, so one of the reasons why I'm a healthy individual, I'm very happy to be able to say that now. I'm disease free, all recovered from all these different things. But there's a lot of people like myself, though. I don't like the term biohacking, but you're looking to optimize. So I'm bio-optimizing my body. And so what I'm looking to do is now improve recovery. So every year I get older chronologically, however, biologically, I want to try to grow younger. So what I'm trying to do is always improve my heart rate variability, which inevitably begins to decline with age. So one of the studies that got me, and I know actually you put it on, like it's actually a research. Your company is called Ultimate Longevity, which again, I will link all of these different products and the research up in the show notes today. But that it actually showed that they did the placebo grounding, sham grounding, I believe you called it, versus true grounding. And the heart rate variability increased 20% with the placebo. So that was good to see, because the placebo should actually increase heart rate variability as well, because you think you're getting a benefit. But the actual grounding increased the participants by 50%. And so there's some remarkable work with heart rate variability. And I think heart rate variability is not the end all be all, but certainly if it's improving over time consistently, well, the body is doing a whole lot better in terms of dealing with stress.
Yeah. And one thing on heart rate variability, we did the study at in the Hershey Clinic, the Hershey Children's Clinic, Hershey, Pennsylvania, but the University of Pennsylvania. They took, I think it was 26 preemies. The preemies are the ones that are the most stressed, and their heart rate variability is, all over the place. But anyhow, the colics and all of the problems they have with those babies. So what we did is put patches on them, grounded them to the earth, and within 30 minutes, within 30 seconds, it stabilized the heart rate variability, but it increased the functioning of heart rate variability by 70%. in preemies. I mean, so if it works on babies, it works on adults.
Yeah. But babies and animals are actually the best to test a lot of these things because they don't typically psych themselves out one way or the other. And so you get a true result, which I like.
Yeah, that study's available also on the earthinginstitute.net.
Yeah, I saw that. That was in conjunction with Dr. Sinatra and Dr. Chevalier, it looks like.
Yeah, they were involved, but this is Palmer at Dr. Palmer at with the university. I think he's with the Cleveland Clinic, and they.
Okay.
It was. I'd have to go look. I can't remember all the names.
I'll find that as well. I'll add it to the show notes. I've got a lot of these studies right here as well, showing the graphs. And it's interesting. So I've been using the sleep mat, and I've been using the floor mat. I'm actually going to try those patches, so that you've got me interested now, because I know a lot of the studies are using the patches because those are just as easy to basically tape onto your feet. Or they come, I'm sure, with a sticky pad, right, that you can just put on your feet. So I would love to be able to try those. I think the number one place that we have to ground out is our feet, just like the earth, right? So I think when in doubt, probably put them on your feet, unless, like you said, if you have specific rheumatoid arthritis, elbow-based pain or something like that, okay, get it right on that, point. But I for me, as strange as it sounds, and again, I don't, I've studied this, and it as a doctor, it's a little strange for me to say, but I'm telling you, reflexology, just of those grounding points on the feet, is just tremendous for your nervous system. And so I tell the people all the time, I'm like, tell me you go for foot reflexology versus a massage, get a massage, but then just go for just your feet, just reflexology. Tell me you don't feel better just with a foot-based massage because of all the grounding out points. So I think there's a lot to this for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's, the title on the book was called Earthing, the Most Important Health Discovery Ever. The reason I put that subtitle on it was because it works and it's free.
That is the nice thing. So, I mean, again, I'll never stop going outside, especially when I'm in Maine. I'll be back in Maine this summer and going out onto the grass. And the great thing, again, like I said, is my dog is my excuse. I have to take him out 3 times a day, so I can get out there in the morning. I can get out there at night. I can walk around barefoot, knowing I'm getting the benefits, and I'm also getting the blue light and then anti-blue light, we'll call it, at night. So those are huge benefits, but there's no reason why I can't get a little extra during the day. Do you see any side effects or downsides to earthing for anybody?
No, we have a couple they're covered in the book, in the Earthing book. And it's if you are on blood thinners, like Coumadin, and if you're going to your doctors, which they are generally, and they're measuring the INR, every few weeks or whatever, then, but once you get grounded and it normalizes your blood viscosity, then if you're on Coumadin and blood thinners, then the blood may get a little too thin, and then you may start bruising a little easier. Or you could, so it's very important that if you're on blood thinners, ask your doctor, work with them, tell them what you're doing, and just have them monitor. If it changes, you have to make a decision. You're going to continue grounding all the time, then you'll have to have changes possibly.
Yes.
If you're not going to ground, just intermittent grounding, then you better stay on your meds. Because that's what keeps you functioning. On the other hand, thyroid, the number one thing that we hear is women's thyroid. I would say over half the women are on a thyroid med. And after they start sleeping grounded, they start talking about, the heart palpitations or whatever. And what it is, it's the thyroid is normalizing. And so they have to, again, start slowly. Go to their doctor will tell them, it's not me. They slowly reduce the thyroid meds.
That's a really good point. So basically, your doctor's not going to have any idea what grounding is. However, they will be able to run your blood work. And if your TSH starts to now drop below a 1 and definitely below a 0.5, then your doctor will just say, hey, I don't know what you've been doing, but we're going to reduce the medication. So you'll work with your doctor to be able to reduce that. And hey, and I'll tell you, keep the grounding going if that is the one variable change that you've made and it's allowing you to reduce your medication, because now you're actually getting all of those benefits without everything we take, every pharmaceutical we take. Sure, there's potential benefit, but there's also going to be not just risks, but there's going to be a compensation by the body. And so we just have to be aware of that. And so if we can get benefits in a more natural way, well, then this could be your new, more natural way. But again, work with your PCP, your specialist, in order to be able to wean off. Any other contraindications? What about pregnancy? Any reasons why you wouldn't want to do this during pregnancy?
Well, and the thing we hear about pregnancy most of all is all the women who weren't able to get pregnant and do get pregnant once they start earthing. And it's very simple, and I know why, because when I was a child, my uncle used to raise minks because that was the big business back then. And again, this is in the 50s. But anyhow, during breeding season, if we got close to the mink house, they come out screaming at us. And it was because if we disturbed the mink, then they would go into a sympathetic state or, fight or flight state, and then they couldn't conceive. And they would have to wait until the next season. So it's the way with women. As soon as you get grounded, put the fire of inflammation out and start resonating with the earth, then all of a sudden you're more able to conceive.
Without a doubt, that is the number one reason we work with women all over the world, whether it be Australia, Europe, South America, all over the US, is that the number one reason, regardless of what anybody tells you, that there's infertility, it's because of stress. Autonomic nervous system, central nervous system stress. When you produce high levels of stress hormones, you're producing lower levels of progesterone. So your cycle is going to be irregular, and you're going to produce lower levels of thyroid. There's just no doubt about it. I mean, you can clinically prove that. So I agree.
It's all out there, and it's kind of like. I lost my thought all of a sudden. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's right. And so again, I look at earthing as this is a great add-on. This is an adjunct to all the great things that you might be doing. Like continue to eat healthy, continue to take your great supplements. Like you mentioned, vitamin D, keep taking your vitamin D, and then use this as one more thing to get closer to how we used to live in nature. So short of living in nature like we used to, sleeping on the ground, wearing animal-based, clothing, you have to just do things now to compensate. Like we're on an internet-based call right now. However, I have, EMF blockers on my phone. I have one on an iPad. I'm sitting 3 feet away or 2 feet away from my computer, and my feet are on a grounding pad. Like it's not that difficult. I don't make this very complicated. And I just say it's a modern way of living more in tune with nature. That's the best we can do.
Yeah, the main thing is grounding helps maintain our immune system electrically stable. So because it does that, we have to find in the future, the next 20 years, ways to have grounded floors, grounded carpeting, grounded furniture, grounded shoes, grounded bedding. But we need to bring that natural energy into our environment in order to maintain our immune system, to protect our immune system.
I agree with that. And now that you're saying it's a great idea, I hope that your company is working on that right now.
I'm like I said, I'm 77. I'm running on the edge.
You got to keep moving us in that direction for sure.
Got to get a whole bunch of younger folks involved.
Well, you can begin sharing your philosophy and the training. I'm going to link up your book, Earthing. I'm going to link up a few of the documentaries that your organization has done. I'm also going to link up the sleeping mat that I have, the smaller grounding mat that I can have. I had one more question. You make almost like a twin bed size mat. Could people do yoga on that? Is it strong enough to be able to do yoga, do you think, on that? That was one question I had.
You might slip around if it's on a hard floor. If it's on a carpet, it might stay better, but it's really thin.
Yes.
And we're trying, we had a yoga thing all ready to go. And then when COVID came along, then kind of a lot of those stuff projects went on hold. But yeah, it's workout mats, grounded workout mats. We've done yoga studies, grounded studies. They're important. It's amazing. People, when they're grounded, they they just have more energy. They're easier to get up, easier to move, more range of motion. And these are like 50, 60-year-olds and, exercising. So it's really important to be grounded when you're doing any kind of exercise.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually try that out, and I'm also gonna use the small mat that I have for some meditation sessions. Just sit right on it with shorts on, so it can actually touch my skin. So that's really interesting. I mean, this was a great conversation. You're a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate everything that you are doing for this health-based space, and so thanks again for coming on.
I appreciate the opportunity. Anytime, any questions, give me a holler. I'm here.
I will do so for sure. So we'll link up everything on today's show notes. So I will mention in the beginning of this episode on the intro what show number that is, and then you'll be able to find out more about Clint right there, more about ultimate longevity, and more about his book, Earthing, as well. So Clint, thank you so much. And once again, we appreciate you.
All right. Very good. Take care. Appreciate it.
Take care.